Welcome to another Creator Series interview here on Studio Live today. Today, I'll be talking to someone who is about to launch a new EP, but with an interesting twist that I think you're going to want to know about. Welcome to Studio Live today, Javier Garza Jr., or better known as, or soon to be better known as, Army of 100 Sheep. How are you, Javier? How's things going there?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing exceptionally well. It is great to have you on here now. The background of this is that I got an email probably a week or 2 weeks ago, and it really piqued my interest. So I get a lot of emails from folks that are saying, "Hey, I'm releasing music. I'm putting something out there. You may want to take a look." You sent me something that really caught my attention. First of all, Army of 100 Sheep, which we have to talk about later on. The sort of music you're producing is right up my alley, so I was in already. And then you told me that you produced it on your iPhone and you mixed it in your car. So that's a lot of things to get in and that we have to talk about in this interview. But first of all, I need to find a little bit more about you, about a little bit more about your musical background. So why don't you take us through what got you into music in the first place?
Well, my dad owned a nightclub, and he was starting his own business, and then like businesses do, they tend to take a nosedive, and so he ended up he had a house kit, a drum kit that was he was about to get rid of,
Yeah.
and I was a little kid, and I was just like, hey, can we take the drums to our house? And so he was like, yeah, that's fine. So we brought the drum kit into our garage, and I just started going away at it and having
Yeah.
fun and learning. And then it just started from there. And then, my friend introduced me to the guitar, and I started to learn different licks and then songwriting. And you know how it kind of snowballs after that.
Absolutely, again, the sort of music that you're producing now. We'll talk a lot more about the EP that's coming out, and what sort of got you into that style of music. And why don't you let folks know a little bit about the sort of music you produce and what got you into that sort of music?
Um, Growing up, I used to listen to a lot of like I used to listen to like Backstreet Boys. This was when I was early kid,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then Bare Naked Ladies came out,
yeah.
and it wasn't until a band called Blink-182 just like completely changed my musical world. And
Mhm.
at that time, that's when I was learning to play music, and their songs were just super easy to learn and fun to play, and that really kind of got me into. And I love their songs, and so I
Mm.
just after that I was like kind of hooked on just writing songs. And so
Which is so cool. And yeah, when I first listened to your music, I'm like, yeah, this is I guess punk. Obviously, punk influences in there, but it's got that pop vibe to it too. So it's quite punk pop, and then it's actually reminiscent. I listened to it, and I'm like, yeah, this is like the sort of punk that I used to listen to. Which if it's 70s punk, people would say is not real punk, but I was
right.
into 90s punk, and then there was like
Yeah.
90s and 2000s punk, which was a little bit softer, I guess, a little bit not quite as edgy, but it had a lot of
Yeah.
melody, had a lot of rhythm, and has just like those, still has those powerful pumping power chords and drums and just the energy that you'd expect from that. So the first time I listened to
Hmm.
your EP, I'm just like, yeah, this has got energy. And and I loved the way that you sort of brought it all together, and the instrumentation, and it was simple yet had some complex rhythms and melodies in there. So I think it's a hard to find that balance sometimes when you're recording and when you're creating, to find something that's going to have enough to keep you interested, but also be, like you say, some of those simple sort of chord progressions
Right.
can just be really great to listen to, and you can bop your head to. So we're going to get into the details of recording. What got you into record? So obviously you're writing songs, you learned drums, you learned guitar. You're like, okay, I'm writing these songs now. What was your step then into starting to record your own music?
So this was back in like when the computers were a lot simpler. There was a program on the PC. I don't know if they still include it now, but it was called Sound Recorder. And it
Okay.
was just like a rinky dink program that had, you could only record one track.
Yep.
And so I would like mess around with that thing. And then later on down the line, Guitar Center or those places, they came out with like the multi-track recorder. And so I would mess around with the 4-track recorder.
Yep.
And then once I graduated high school, my dad ended up sending me to like audio school, and I got to learn, how they actually record songs in like a studio. And
Yeah.
so, and then just started from there. And then I had, got my PC and Pro Tools and so forth. And it's really interesting because when I started this project with GarageBand, the intention was just to do like a demo. Like I
Mm.
just wanted to do the songs as a demo so that I could go into a real studio. And then it just kind of the process and where I was at, it just turned into like I was just like, well, what if I just, it's already sounded pretty decent. Like, what if I just finish it all the way? And
Yeah.
it just turned into something that just was like, this is really cool.
Yeah, totally.
So,
But yeah, and that's probably what gets to me because I didn't know, and I deliberately haven't spoken to you much. We had like 5 minutes chat before the interview, but I need to know that. So you've got a PC with Pro Tools, and you're using a real DAW, as some folks might
mhm,
say, and then
right.
you start using GarageBand. So what sort of was it? Just that you, like, again, that you wanted to record a demo and you thought, hey, this is easy and convenient, and then I'll go and do it properly later, and then it just turned out that it was pretty cool. Yeah.
Well, with the PC, I found that like, you know, from what I learned in school, I had the Pro Tools rig, I had the computer set up, and there was something missing there. And I was like, well, what is it? And there's a difference. There's a difference between, audio and musicianship. And
Mm.
I was lacking the musicianship. And so I made a decision to kind of like, I gave away my PC, I gave away the Pro Tools to my friend, and I was like, I'm just going to focus on being a better guitar player, better songwriter, better singer, because I
Mm.
don't want to like rely on anything. I don't want to rely too heavily on the Pro Tools.
Yeah.
And then, and so, once I kind of got my musicianship up just a little bit, I was like, okay, well, now it's time to record. But I had already given away all my recording gear. So I was like,
Mm.
well, I guess I got to go into a studio. And I had messed around a little bit with GarageBand, but it wasn't until like I started, making the demos that I really got into it. And it
Yeah.
ended up being really cool. Like, it's a really cool software to use. And it's just wild that it's free
Yeah.
on my iPhone. It's just like blows my mind, really.
Yeah.
So,
Well, yeah, and as you're probably aware, yeah, I'm a big fan of GarageBand, and folks
yeah.
on the channel know that, yeah, I used GarageBand for to record my album last year and to record all the
Hmm.
singles and things, and exactly the same sort of story. We've got a very similar story. So I had the PC and I got the audio interface and I had the software, and I was starting to do it. And it's a really fascinating point you make, and I'm working on a bit of a theory at the moment because exactly what you said there is exactly how I feel. I think the people that talk to me, especially folks that are getting back into recording or music after a break, they tell me that they want something that's just simple. They want to be able to just hit the record button and start recording. And I think it's musicians that want the ease of use and something that they can just hit it, just like an old 4-track. You just record, you record a part, you hit record, you record another, you overdub straight away. And it's more the audio technician. So it's interesting you say you went to audio school and you learned how to be an audio technician, and then you
Hmm.
want to be more like a musician. And I think so there's some of us that like to be both and that get into the geeky, nerdy side of the tech and also do the musicianship. But more often, folks that just want to say, hey, I want to make a really good record and I want to record it and I want to write the songs and I want to get it done. They're not actually that fussed about the actual hardware and software they're using. They just want to get it,
Right.
make a good sound. So
Hmm.
really, really interesting to hear that that was your experience along those lines as well. So we've kind of covered what made you choose that particular platform and why you was recording there. So tell us a little bit about the story of this EP in particular. So because again, when I looked at that press kit, obviously I was attracted by the fact you said I made it in iOS and then mixed it in your car. Did I get that right? Did I read that part right? How did you go about that? Take us through that.
Okay. So like before this EP came, uh, before I got started working on it, I had tried to do another EP. It was an attempt at like a country album, and it was at a big studio, and of course I was paying for the whole thing. So, but I didn't do the budget right. It never got finished, and I'm just like, what do I do?
Mm.
And but I still, as artists or creators, we still have to keep creating no matter. And so I'm just scheming in my mind, well, okay, how do I keep doing this?
Mm.
And and I've been reading, a lot of like business books and just trying to, be well rounded. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't know how I'm going to pay for studio sessions, but I'll save up the money. In the meantime, I'll just start doing these demos on GarageBand, and so I decided, I'm going to write however many songs, and I started doing the demos, and that's when it turned into, full album and started sounding good.
Wow.
And then, and I was like, okay, so I saved a lot of money by doing it on GarageBand. How am I gonna, like, let me go to an engineer to mix it. And I was thinking about it and thinking about it, and I had such a great experience, like, not spending any money on the recording process, that I was like, I just was thinking, how do I mix this without spending any money? And because I was gonna buy the iLoud speakers
Oh yeah.
they're like $200 or $300.
Yeah.
And I was going to use those and be like, okay, I can just mix at home, and then I don't know where it came, but just the idea was, I just attached it to the car, and I said, well, I said, let me try mixing it in the car, because the biggest thing that is a limitation of why people don't mix in the car is because they have a big studio at home and they can't really take the studio into the car. and and it just turns out that you can take your phone into the car, and that the studio is all right in there. And the more I thought about it, I was just like, well, I explained this to a friend of mine, and he was saying, yeah, that makes sense, because a lot of times when you finish a mix, everyone does the car test and they go take it out into their car.
Yep.
And so I'm just like, So
you skip the middleman. You don't have to do the car.
Right.
You're doing the car test from day one. That is that is so cool, and it's something that I'd never thought of, and I didn't like. Obviously, we've all referenced mixes in the car and on different speakers, but being able to do that, and what I love is that my passion is that everyone has the ability to do this stuff, and it doesn't matter what gear you do or you don't have. A good song is a good song, and I've always said a great song recorded in a crappy way is still going to be better than a crappy song recorded in $1 million studio.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
You can find a balance if you can get a really good song, and then you can record it in the best possible way using the gear that you have. I think that's super cool, and I'm definitely going to be going and hooking my iPhone up in my car and trying a mix. I think that will make a fun video here on Studio Live today. Let us know in the comments if you want Pete to do a car mix. See if I can follow in Javier's footsteps and actually do that. It sounds daunting. I'd worry that I'd have the speakers the balance wrong, or I'd just have turned the bass boost on or something. So
yeah.
Oi. Very, very cool. So in terms of your recording, so talk a bit about using GarageBand and using that to record and then to mix it. What sort of gear did you have? So how did you actually get the sounds in? What sort of equipment did you have set up when you were doing your recording process using GarageBand on your iPhone?
The two biggest pieces of, like, useful gear, the tools that I used, was the first one was a virtual drummer in GarageBand.
Yeah.
That, I mean, I love the way that you can set it to follow the instruments that you're playing. Yes. And it makes it sound like unique to how your song goes. And that's the biggest one that I used. That it just really, that was when I, like, discovered, I was like, I could probably do this, because I'm not having to, like, tap the actual drum. It just kind of follows it. And then the second piece of equipment was I took a chance, and I was like, I went ahead and got the iRig HD2, and I was like, let me just, that was like the transitioning period where I was like, okay, they're demos. And then I said, well, let me spend a little bit of money. Let me see what it sounds like. And when I heard that thing on electric guitar, I was like, that was such a game changer. I was just like, okay, this can turn into something, So.
And that is so cool. And the thing is, I'm listening to these tracks, and the cool thing is when you get lost in a song and when you start listening to music, and folks will be able to experience this when your EP comes out, or maybe there's somewhere they can get a sneak peek. We'll talk about that later. But when you're actually listening to it, you're not sitting there going, this is a virtual drummer. Like, no one's thinking that. If you're getting lost in the mix, then you're just going, hey, this is a cool song. And I think, and I know that the purists will probably say to me, you got to have a drum kit. You got to mic it up with like 17 different mics, and you got to do all the things.
Yeah.
the thing is that no, the difference is not as considerable as it was, and I think that's totally true. Like the people that got into MIDI way back in the day, and the drum was just like the boom, like the early
Mhm.
MIDI drums were just awful. When you listen to a virtual drummer now, like you say, you add the follow, you bring in, you got all the different drummers and the different patches, and you've got well, you do have complete control if you want it, or you can tweak the settings and you can say, yeah, get up on the hi-hats here and then get over on the ride cymbal for this section. There's so many options that you have there. And then, like you say, the iRig HD, yeah, I think everyone that's ever got one of those, especially if you play guitar and you play with an amp before and you're like, this is not going to sound anything like my guitar through
Right,
a stack. And the first time you plug it in and you're just like, oh, okay.
yeah.
Oh, and the more you play with it, the more you tweak your tone, you're like, actually, yeah. So I can actually picture you going through that aha moment where you were just like, yeah, just a demo. Hang on. Wait
Yeah.
a minute. If I just tweak this, oh, there you go. That's exactly the
Yep.
thing you want. So yeah, that's so
Yep.
cool. Love it. So we've talked about sort of the hardware. Is there any other sort of software or plugins or any other tools that you use to create the EP that folks out there might be interested in that helped you sort of carve your sound or get the sort of sound that you were looking for?
Honestly, no. Everything that you hear can be found all in GarageBand. I didn't really like get any outside plugins or any. I tried to kind of like do the outside. Like I think the iRig comes with like Amplitude, but you got to
Yeah.
pay for all that.
Yeah.
And I was having such a great time, saving all my money that I
Yeah.
was just like, nah, I'll just do everything in house. And so everything is all in app and GarageBand. So
That is cool, and that is motivating, I know, for a lot of folks, because I get those questions. It's funny, whenever I put a video out, I'll put out a plug-in video, and maybe 100 people will watch it. As soon as I put free plug-in video or a stock plug-in video, then 1,000 people will jump on board, because I think people like the idea of just using what they've got. And again, when you've got GarageBand, like you say, it's free, and the number of plugins and effects and things that you can do in GarageBand are quite amazing. And I think you've proven here that you can create a really good sounding record without using any of that additional stuff. And hey, maybe you want to use it in the future for future releases. Now, speaking of which, this is EP number 1. Did I read in your release that you're looking to release more? Is this kind of the first in a series along these lines here?
yes, it is. I'm so I recorded an entire album, and that was the whole purpose. And in trying to figure out like the marketing of it, somewhere along the way, I just decided to split it up into 3 sections.
Yep.
And so the first one, and they're kind of like separated by not genre, but just by sound.
Yeah.
The the first one you've heard, and it definitely has more of that like pop punk kind of
Yeah.
2000 sound, and the second one's going to be a little bit darker, and then a third one's a nice blend of both. But the first one's coming out January 1st. The second
Great.
one's going to be the second one's coming out May 1st, and then the third one's coming out like September 1st. So
That is a good release schedule. Just good timing there. So for those watching this recently, you've got a bit of time to wait. Yeah, so you're gonna have to hang out for a few weeks before you're going to be able to listen to the EP. But it'll be well worth the wait for sure to take a listen to that. Now, obviously, you've been through a pretty big process here, and we've talked about the things that you've done and how you've got through and creating music. What's the one piece of advice that you'd pass on to someone who's sitting there going, well, that's okay for you, Javier. You've gone to audio school. I haven't. How am I going to do all of this? What's the one sort of big lesson that you learned or some advice that you'd pass on to folks?
I would say don't let the lack of money keep you from starting a project, and don't let that be your excuse, because nowadays with YouTube you can learn all that there is, and the great example is like there's a couple of videos that I saw on your channel that helped me with this project. And so there's a lot of education tutorial out there. I mean, audio school does help, but it's not going to make or break your project.
Yeah.
I think just getting started was the most important thing for me.
Yeah, no,
So,
absolutely, and it's like you say, the excuse that we use, and I keep sort of harping on this one point, but if you don't have any gear or you don't know where to start, just start now with
hmm
the gear you have.
yeah,
Don't think about, well, as soon as I get this, then I can start, or as soon as I get that, then I can start. And the problem is, I see a lot of folks do the opposite of that, which is that they save up, they buy the things, but then they don't have the experience of creating music to actually get the best out of the gear. So I
mm-hmm.
think you can get ahead. You can get the gear can be ahead of the skills and
Right,
experience you have in recording. And the best way to get skills and experience is to do it. So you've now
right.
recorded a whole album of tracks. So you've done that whole thing of record, mix, rinse, repeat, do it again and again. And I'm sure by the end of that last track, you'd learn a whole bunch of stuff that you didn't know at the start of the first one. So if you've
Oh,
been working
absolutely.
to perfect that very first track for all that time, you'd probably be no further along. Whereas you just keep going, you keep doing it. So
Hmm.
that's very cool. Now, I often ask folks what their proudest moment creating music is. Now, I mean, it may be ahead of you because you're about to release an album or 3 EPs in the new year. What else is there, or is there anything else, or is that 100% it? Your proudest moment since you started creating music?
The proudest moment I would say is now everything was recorded, GarageBand, but the one thing that I did do that was outside of the box was I sent it in to get mastered.
Yeah.
And that was the biggest thing because once I sent it off, I just was like, like, and just waiting, and then getting it back. And once it was like finished, done, that was just like a big it was a big deal for me, and I'm so proud of this record and just that whole, you know, and the end of it and just the satisfaction of the completion of it was just like amazing.
Very cool, and that's interesting. So, why don't you just take us because we've got a bit of time here? I know a lot of folks have considered that, myself included, of actually sending off and getting a mastering engineer to master your tracks. And for those that maybe don't know about mastering, so mastering is basically just the final stage in the mixing process. So once you've got your final mix, mastering is those final tweaks that are just going to tweak, usually limiting and compression and EQ and very fine adjustments just to take your mix from awesome to super awesome at the end of the process. So what was that like in terms of that? So you sent away your tracks, you got them back. Was it like a first time thing the first time you got them back, or was there anything you had to say? Actually, I was thinking more like this. What was the process there?
Um, I had used the company that I use. I had already sent masters back, and the way they do it, it's kind of like online, and they actually just do a great job. Anything that they do, it just sounds it. I don't know. I can't even explain it. It just
Mhm.
sounds pretty much exactly what I'm looking for.
Cool.
And maybe it's just because I've used them for so long that I know what to expect. But like I've tried some of the other plugins, where you upload it to like these kind of and
Yeah.
compared to, and I did a comparison, and I was just like, I'm so glad I sent it off. And and that particular company, it was not that expensive, and
Yeah.
so yeah.
Well, if you yeah, and if you do want to share that, there's a bunch of links that are down in the description. So yeah, perhaps you can shoot that through to me. I don't have that yet, but if you want to recommend that service, then let us know. Yeah, I
Sure.
know folks have played around with self mastering, Lander and eMastered, and some of these sort of
Hmm.
automated services. They work well for some people. And again, I'm not looking down my nose at anyone for whatever you choose to do with your own music, but sometimes that second set of ears can actually be super important because you get so close to your own song. And even if you can't afford any sort of mastering, my recommendation here is at least send it off to someone else and say, hey, can you take a listen to this? I often tell the story that I used to mix my vocals way too loud because you get
Hmm.
stuck into the song and I'm like, I want my vocals to really pop, and you'd compress and you compress and you compress. And then I'm listening back and you become deaf in some ways to some of the things that are wrong with your own mix. And it's only sending it off to some other buddies and saying, hey, what do you think of this mix? And they're like, your vocals need to come down like 6 dB. That is just overpowering, man. I'm like, oh, okay. Listen back to it and like, oh, yeah, okay. You've got a point. So, yeah, I think having someone else else listen to music and provide that feedback can often really help you out as well. And if you can afford to pay someone to mix or to master your music, then by all means, it's another set of ears that can help out for sure.
Mm-hmm.
All righty, we're coming to the end here. This has been fascinating. I've learned some stuff. I'm going to my car like tonight to start mixing some songs. So is there any parting words that you had or anything else that you wanted to add or let folks know? And then we'll make sure that we let folks know where they can follow you and where they can obviously check out and if can they pre-order the EP, all of that sort of stuff. So anything you wanted to finish off here with today, Javier?
This has been a great experience. Thank you for having me on your show. Yeah, the album, the EP comes out on January 1st, the start of the new year, 2020, and you can find it on Bandcamp. You can pre-order it. Also, I'll be having a link for you can pre-save it to your Spotify playlist from that link. So,
yep. Do that. For sure. Yeah, I love that. I love some of those hyper follow things where you can actually get in there. And it's a nice surprise when I've done that before and I've just sort of clicked that and then something just pops up and you're like, oh yeah, that album, I completely forgot. And then it just adds to your library and you start playing it. So that is super cool. Well, I know I can't wait to be streaming. I've had the privilege of actually listening to the music and the challenge with a show like this is that I don't play the music. So people are like, oh, we want to hear the tunes. So I don't play the music here. For various reasons, YouTube content and all sorts of other reasons. But yeah, trust me when I say that this is going to be a very cool album. And I know for folks that are into home and mobile recording, knowing the story behind this, when you actually get out there and listen to the album, you're going to be picturing Javier sitting in his car. I meant to ask you, did anyone ever sort of walk past or drive past and give you strange looks when you're there on your iPhone mixing in your car?
They didn't, but my girlfriend or my fiance and her son, they would come out all the time and just like poke their heads and be like, "What is he doing in there?" And I'm just like, "You don't understand." Like, but
that is very, very cool. And if you don't do it, I will. But yeah, I would love to see. I think you need to get out there and get someone to film you and do a tutorial on how to mix a song in your car. That could be a good pre-release the week before Christmas present for folks. There you go. I'm planting the seed, Javier. That one's yours for free. Get that done. That would be a good promotional tool, I promise you. Very, very cool. Well, yeah, check out the links that we have down below. You can follow Javier, as we said. You can pre-save it on Spotify. Check it out on Bandcamp, and then we've also got your Twitter and Facebook and all the usual places where you can follow along with Army of 100 Sheep. We didn't ask about the name. Maybe we'll leave that as a mystery and folks can ask you about that in the comments, or we can find that out about. Maybe we'll chat to you in January once the album's out, and then we can find out the name. There you go. We'll leave that as a teaser, little taste of that for the future. Been an absolute pleasure having you here on Studio Live today. If you enjoyed this one, hit the like button, folks, and subscribe, because we talk to different creators every week here. Well, not every week, but very regularly, and there are new videos coming out here on Studio Live today every day. Thanks, Javier. It's been a pleasure, my friend. We'll chat to you soon.
Thanks, Pete.